Good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webinar. Just while people are settling in, a couple of housekeeping notes. One, we will be taking questions, so if you'd like to submit those through the Q&A panel, we'll get to as many as we can, and if we can't, we'll be following up with you afterwards. And secondly, we will be recording this webinar as well, so it will be made available to you after the event. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Martin van Glabbeek, Manager of Corporate Quality and Data Management at Alliander. Martin is a thought leader in the area of business architecture and specifically the use of business capabilities as a lens to look at the organization. And so with that, I'll hand over to Martin. Martin, over to you.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me. Today I will talk a little bit about Alliander and how Alliander has used business architecture and business design to support its agile and digital transformation. Currently, I am working as a manager of corporate quality and data management at Alliander, and within my responsibilities is business architecture and business process management. And to start with, I would like to tell you a little bit about Alliander itself, because Alliander is well known in the Netherlands. It's the largest regional grid operator for electricity and natural gas. And that basically means that we provide the infrastructure and services for the distribution of electricity and natural gas to both industries and consumers. And as you can imagine, currently our main challenge is the energy transition. We are, as all of the world is in the Netherlands, investing a lot in solar power, large solar fields that we are building. We are investing in wind power, large wind farms that are being constructed in the moment. And of course, we are switching the use of fossil fuels in cars to electric vehicles. We are switching from gas-powered heating to electrical heating. And all those great developments in the energy transition, they mean that the current power grid in the Netherlands is under a lot of pressure. So basically, you can imagine that all that new usage of electricity and that new production of electricity at very unpredictable moments can cause something of a large traffic jam of electrons on the electricity grid. And basically that means that we have to invest in that electricity grid for the coming few years. We have to build and build and build lots of new connections, lots of new cables, lots of new substations and stations to distribute all that power from those new sources of electricity to those new consumers of electricity. And basically we have done some rough calculations which come to the conclusion that in the coming 10 years we actually have to do the work in the same amount of work as we have done over the past 50 years. So that means that we need a lot of new technical people. We need a lot of new technologies in the field to be able to cope with that enormous amount of work. But also it means that we are investing a lot in our information systems and new solutions on the IT side, not only to manage those projects, to help those people in the field to do their work in a better way, but also to manage the power exchange in that distribution grid in a better way, so that we prevent those traffic jams of electrons on the grid, and that we use the capacity that we have in the electricity grid in the most optimal way. So, for example, you can think of remote control of the grid. If there's an outage, we will be able in the future to switch to a new part of the grid where that outage hasn't occurred, so that we can still maintain delivery of power to consumers. You, of course, you have to think of cybersecurity, making sure that the grid cannot be harmed by attacks from outside parties. You can think of using virtual reality and augmented reality to train our personnel in the field, to assist the personnel in the field when they have to do complex um, um, changes in that distribution grid, or they have to perform complex actions. So the data that we have stored in our systems is readily available for those people in the field. And of course, you can think of things like customer self-service portals and new billing schemes for using the electricity grid. And that basically means that we have a lot of complex projects using new technology going on at the moment. And of course, like many companies at the moment, we are investigating ways to handle those projects in a faster, in a cheaper, but most importantly, in a more agile way. Because we don't know actually what will happen in 1 or 2 or 3 years' time. So we can't afford to have long-term 3, 4 year projects anymore, where the outcome basically is fixed, but you actually don't know what you need in within that period of 2 or 3 years. So we are switching within the IT department, but also in our business departments, to a much more agile way of working. So really now the agile way of working is embedded in the way we do things at Alliander. For example, our digital business program has evolved from just a few teams a few years ago to almost 90 to 100 Scrum teams in 5 or 6 agile release trains. So that's an enormous change in the way we are doing, with the way we are creating new IT solutions. So the business is also on board on that. The platform development is on board on that. So we have really learned over the last few years to work in such a fashion. And the other thing is, at the moment, that we are seeing that new agile way of working in the IT and in the solution area means that also the standing organization has to become much more agile. So we found actually that the current structure of the organization was not helping in providing those services to customers in the most efficient and the most effective way. The silos, the functional silos in the organization, were actually limiting the way we were able to provide those solutions, which basically means that if you are building those fantastic new IT applications, but you can't deliver in the end operationally the quality that the customers are expecting, or you can't deliver the technology, the technology in the field, the connections to those solar panels in a fast way, then actually all that investment in those great IT solutions has been for nothing. So what we did over the last basically 1.5 years is that we changed and transformed the organization in a much more agile and lean organization, where basically the new organizational structure follows the end-to-end customer process. So we are able to deliver those new connections, those new cables in the fields in a better way, less hindered by those organizational silos, and much more customer oriented. And this is quite innovative. I think it's very good that we came up with this new way of organization, of organizing Alliander, where we actually got rid of the old hierarchy, the old silos. People are much freer now to go and work together on those solutions and to come up with new and improved processes that cross the boundaries of those functional departments. So that's a really cool development that we are in right now. We are actually, the 1st of January was the kickoff of this new organization. So a lot of change and transformation is happening at Alliander at the moment as we speak. But that's of course great. That's a great development. But it also means that we have a lot of challenges, because coping with change means that we need new structures, new ways of managing what's happening here. For example, on the one hand, our main challenge is that in this new agile way of working is that we have that many teams. We have 90 or 100 teams which are working on new solutions, new processes at the same time in a very agile and autonomous way. But being autonomous also means, of course, that those teams probably are not so well aware of what the other teams are doing. And the managers of those teams probably are very much focused on the business and what's happening on the business outside, and not so much in a programmatic way looking at the longer term horizon of 3 or 4 years. So it's really a question of how, in that agile way with all those autonomous teams, do you keep track of what's going on? How do you maintain a clear vision of the future so that everybody in that autonomous way of working is still working towards the same goal? How do you actually keep track of the progress of all those distributed teams? How do you know where they are at one point in time in terms of finishing their solutions or starting new work? And how do you manage all that interaction and interdependency between those programs? So that's basically on the more change side of the business. That's our main challenge. On the other hand, is that the actual standing organization is also transforming. So people who were, really experienced in working within that hierarchy, they are now having to work in a completely different way. And that new way of working, the new way of working in those end-to-end processes also means that people don't actually see in the way they were used to what other departments are doing. And those other departments are changing how they are working. You may now, in the old times, you had simple one department for customer interaction. But now, actually, because we work in different work streams, there may be 4 or 5 or 6 places where we interact with the customer. There used to be one asset management department where we kept track of all the assets. But now, that asset function, taking in asset data, could be 4 or 5 different places. So we need something that helps us maintaining that overview of what's happening in the organization. And also we need something that guides us in next steps. So we need to be aware of where we are at the moment in that transformation process, and we need to be able to, take decisions of what to change next. What are the strategic choices in transforming the organization? Where does it hurt the most? And what is the best place now to have an intervention in terms of structure or in terms of process? And those both challenges, so more the agile transformation challenge and the organizational transformation challenge, which are happening at the same time, that's where we are working at the moment with the architects, with the enterprise architects and the business architects. And basically we say, don't panic. We are in a transformation. We know that things will become a lot less clear than you were used to, because all those clear structures, they are changing, they are being transformed. But we have an instrument, a good instrument, that helps you keep that overview and helps you give that insight that you need, and it's the business architecture. So we actually started working on our business architecture fundament, the basics of business architecture, already a few years ago. We started, for example, by creating a good business capability model. So that was actually before we started this transformation, we started working on a clear model business capability framework of the Alliander organization, which could give us insight in which capabilities were being used, were being built by new IT solutions in the organization. So, and you probably have seen business capability frameworks already. And we use them because they are a common vocabulary. So we may have different processes with different names that appear different in the organization and different departments, but they could be the same business capability. And by creating this overview of business capabilities, we are able to give a good overview of what the organization actually is built of. So it's more stable than business processes, because business processes, they change, they have different starting points, different endpoints, they have different names. The organization structure may change, and that's of course why it's so great to have that business capability framework during that time of transformation, because it's very, very stable. The actual capabilities don't change. They're not dependent on IT systems. And if you do it in a good way, then everybody recognizes the names, and you have really a common vocabulary to talk about the organization independent of where you are in the organization. And this next slide will show you what our current business capability framework looks like. It's not really important to really go into detail, but it's good to know that we have a complete overview now of all Alliander business capabilities, both strategic, more operational capabilities, and the supporting capabilities. And we have identified where in the organization are those capabilities being deployed. So where are people working that we can identify as working on one capability or the other. We have matched not only people, but also the teams and the departments towards those business capabilities. So we have a really good overview of our current of our current business capabilities. And of course, this is very good to have in times of stability, in times of slow change, but it's very, very important to have this in that time of business transformation. And I will show you a few use cases where we have actually been able to use that business capability framework to support both the agile transformation on the IT side and the transformation on the organizational side. So, for example, for each and every a critical business capability, we have created a business vision. And not only a business vision, but also a vision of how IT and data can transform that business function. So independent of where you are in the organization, there is a clear business vision, which actually has also a very nice visualization. We have these large posters on the wall, but everybody can look and see, well, this is what we are currently working towards in our IT program. So for every critical business capability, there's such a vision. Another a good use of those business capabilities is that we are able to do a sort of an assessment of performance um, um, based not on local applications or local processes, but we are able to add up all the IT systems, for example, that are relevant for asset management and do an asset management assessment. Or we are able within those 4, 5, 6 systems that we have for knowledge management, which is one separate capability, to add up the performance, the cost, or the efficiency of those knowledge management systems, and really have a good overview of how is knowledge management performing in the organization. We are able to allocate costs of IT systems to those business capabilities. So actually, we also know if the amount of investment in those capabilities is related to the business criticality or the business importance of that business capability. So, and we are doing all this stuff. Of course, it's not fully deployed yet, but we are working on, filling the databases behind this that you need to be able to do those kinds of assessments. And a very different use, which I also like to highlight, is that it helps our architects, our enterprise architects, our IT architects to have business impact. Because if you have your business architecture right, if you have those business capabilities which have been related to people, to teams, to departments, then you are able to much more align your IT architecture to the business architecture, and therefore the IT architecture gets more meaning. It's more meaningful for business managers, business employees. So we are able to align much more between business and IT by having that business capability and that business architecture. And for example, that's what happened in our IT portfolio management, which was very much an IT-driven portfolio management. But by being able to connect those IT applications to the business architecture, to those business capabilities, it became much more visible for the business. Where are we investing? Where are the projects where's the money going that IT is spending? Where in our business does it have an impact? So we are much more able now within our business IT portfolio management to make decisions about IT projects, about IT developments in relation to what the business needs actually are. And we see, for example, that we have white spots where we are not investing enough from a business point of view in IT. And the other way around, of course, we see now that we are over investing IT because we have the solution there, but there's actually no business need. So we can derive all those kinds of conclusions from the fact that we have now connected business architecture with our IT portfolio. And on the business side itself, and I'm actually quite proud of this development, is the fact that we have our strategic personnel planning, which was in the past very much related to those business functions and the development of those business functions. We have it now connected to our business architecture. So we are able to relate the external trends, the business strategy, and plot that on the business capabilities, on the business architecture, and see where people will be needed over the longer term. And we are able to fine-tune the amount of development that goes into those business functions and relate it to what's happening outside and inside in our strategy. So we have a much more refined model of developing our human capital. And there's more. So we have created some kind of overview of use cases for business architecture, where we are thinking that the relation between, for example, application rationalization and the business capabilities, or IT road mapping and business capabilities, can give much more meaning of IT, what IT investments mean for the business. And on the other hand, by using that business architecture as a fundament, as a groundwork for business planning, for business analysis, we are able to do a much more integral overview of the company. So not within those silos in that business, but we are able to look over the borders of those business silos and do really integrated business planning on an enterprise level. So that's really helpful, and we are really looking forward to, in the future, explore more and more how that business architecture can help us in all those different use cases. So in the end, and that's the vision that we are working towards, is that we will have, by using those architectural models, that business architecture and the enterprise architecture, to create a digital twin of the Alliander organization. So we are really able to connect with those models data about our performance, how we are actually doing within those business functions, visualize that performance. For example, use process mining to see how our processes are doing. Use your application performance management to see how your IT is supporting your business, and really get a more or less real-time overview of the complete organization. We visualize that, and we use that as the basis for the next steps in our agile transformation. Because you can also see then how organizational structure, business process, data, software, new development, and AI work together. Because we are used to investing in, either organizational structure, either business process, either a new AI application. But now, by connecting all those elements, we can really make choices about where to invest and where not to invest, or where to invest later. But also making sure that this works together, that not in one part of the organization we're thinking of doing a restructuring of a business process, while in the IT department we are at that moment working on digitizing the old business process. So basically, if I would summarize this, the use of business architecture, it gives us the whole of the actual enterprise in one view. It gives us a much better understanding of where we currently are and what the gap is with our future vision, and thereby we are much better enabled to do, our strategic planning and the agile execution in a much more integral and end-to-end way. And that's really the business benefit of having a good business architecture. And at the moment, we're also looking into investing more in the business architecture function, so that we have, more people who have the right knowledge to use the tooling, and really also advise the different business departments on how they can work with this, this instrument of business architecture. So, therefore, I think that we are also seeing a change in how we look at architecture itself. So the architecture function is not about what the architects do. It doesn't end with having architectural models that are sitting somewhere in your architecture tooling, but it's really, those models are the starting point for analyzing and making decisions within the business function, and really being an instrument for decision making, which is used by business managers and business directors. So that's really the change that we see currently in how we deal with enterprise and business architecture. So that's basically my story about how Alliander is transforming, how Alliander is using business architecture to become more agile, to transform its organization. In the end, help the energy transition, um, 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 speed up the energy transition, and make sure that all consumers will have, their electricity distribution in the way that they were used to before all this was happening. So thanks for having me, and I'm now able to take some questions.
Martin, thanks so much for what a fantastic presentation. And we've got a number of questions in. I think we've only got time for one or two, so I'm going to try and roll a lot of these questions up into a two-part question, mainly around the concept of business capability-based planning and viewing the organization through a business capability lens. So part A is, how did you initially formulate your business capability model? And secondly, I'll try and summarize this. How did you sell the concept of this new language? Because you talked about this being a new language
Yes.
within the organization, and what were the learnings you found as you positioned this new way of talking?
Yeah, well, excellent questions. Thank you for those. Well, I may make it sound easy. You create your business capability map and you start working with it. Actually, it was a long-term process, where we first, were able to gather a small group of believers. We actually, we didn't start from scratch. We had, of course, our high-level business processes and our business functions. We had, luckily, also for the utility industry, a few reference models that were already available outside, and were also used in parts of the organization, also mainly on the IT side. So we were able to use the stuff that people already recognized a little bit, and put that together. And there was this small group of believers who were then really starting to think of all those use cases. So we didn't start by advertising the fact that we have a business capability framework. We actually started by going, for example, to the portfolio manager, saying, we have a way of making your portfolio management better, more connected with the business, more connected with your investment strategy. We actually, the strategic personnel planning, which was a use case which I would never have thought of before, was actually a great way of selling the business capability framework. Not for the fact that we had a capability framework, but that we were able to create a strategic personnel planning process which was usable for the whole of the organization. And that really took flight as people started to notice that, hey, that they're in that department, they have done something with those business capabilities. And then people started asking questions: what's business capability? What are these business capabilities? And then, it took a little bit off, and we were able to create a masterclass on business architecture in our operational organization. And then we started getting some notice, but it took 2 or 3 years. And I think also, on the adoption, what we see is that not having a common language was a problem before. And the fact that we now had a common language was useful inside Alliander, but the last 6 months or so, we have also been able to, with other regional grid operators within the Netherlands, we have come to a common capability framework, because also we work in a lot of projects, we work together with other grid operators. And there we also saw the need of having a common language, and being able to define projects in a way that everybody could really understand what's the scope, what's the impact.
Well, thank you so much for that.
I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, it does. It is great. And it's great that you laid out that this is a journey. It's not something you can just implement overnight.
Definitely.
So, Martin, thank you so much for your time. And I've got to say, it's really incredible the way you're using business capabilities as a way to bring together and create a common language for business architecture, enterprise architecture, the project management office, and the business as well. So Martin, once again, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure our audience found this presentation fascinating.
Thank you.
So folks, thank you all for taking the time to join today. And if you'd like to learn more about BizDesign, please come and visit us at bizdesign.com, where you can get a demonstration of our software and also see more case studies and webinars just like the one you saw today. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a great day.